We have just passed the first fortnight of this crossing. At the heart of this great vastness, a sight I've never seen before, I feel absolutely lost. But every now and then there is a flutter of excitement. Finally, I hear the crashing of waves, the rocking motion of the sea like a strange cradle, one that startles just as much as it comforts. These descriptions of a voyage I've often heard in Mr. Broadwood's showrooms, but finally I am experiencing it myself. My first time away from home. I have been specially prepared for this journey, equipped, donning a fresh outfit. I even have some surplus tools, should anything go wrong. But this outfit feels rather uncomfortable, I must say, bound to a thick, heavy blanket. My Elizabeth told me that if I just stay still, all will be well. Speaking of which, I miss her terribly. She had left for Singapore a week before me and promised me dearly that she will receive me at the docks upon my arrival. She's been so worried, fearful that this voyage will throw my health into the perils, fearful that I will not return to her the same as when we parted. Dear God, she means the world to me. In my loneliest moments on board, for I've only had the company of strangers, some rather strange smelling and odd looking, it is the shining memories of those hours we spent at home, in the drawing room, that have buoyed my spirits. I remember the touch of her fingers on me, commanding me even with the most gentle and deft of touches. I can still hear her sweetest angelic voice singing the Bellini aria, as though she were right beside me. This new world that waits ashore, what does it hold? Will I be accepted? Will I be favoured and cherished just as much? What tongues will people speak in? Will I comprehend? What will my room in the new house look like? This new iron bracing makes it hard for me to speak for long. I suppose only I hold the keys to my future, 88 of them. Mr. Broadwood says that I have been made expressly for the climate. We shall see.
Just in case there's any sliver of doubt, that was the voyage of a British piano coming into Singapore. May I ask, how many of you in this room play the piano or have ever been sent for piano lessons? Wow, that's basically the whole room. All right, so I have been playing the piano for over a decade, and until last year, I had never really thought about how did a piano come into Singapore at the very beginning, right? But once I started thinking, I just could not stop, because Singapore 200 years ago in 1823 looks really different from the Singapore that we know of now. And in 1819, just to give some perspective, Beethoven had just finished writing his Hammerklavier Sonata. Franz Liszt and Robert Schumann were 8 tiny 8-year-olds, right? And 1819, for those Singaporeans in the room, would know from our history class that that was the year that Sir Stamford Raffles founded Singapore. Or, to put it in a more diplomatically correct way, that was the year that Sir Stamford Raffles of the East India Company signed a treaty that made Singapore a British port and colony. 1819 was a very important year in the history of pianos as well. That was the year that Broadwood and Sons created their first upright piano. In 1819, I'm confident that Singapore had nothing to do with pianos, but by the end of the 19th century, half of the pianos manufactured in Britain was for export. Half of the pianos. And in the 1895 version of Broadwood's, coffee table book equivalent, they were advertising the fact that Singapore was one of its leading non-Western markets of export. Such a small place like Singapore, right? Alongside places like Venezuela, Israel, Hong Kong, these were the leading non-Western places for export. So how on earth did that happen? And, right, if you were living in Singapore in the 19th century, how would you get a piano? Because these days, right, I learned that you can even buy a piano on eBay or Carousel in Singapore, or you could walk into Steinway and Sons Gallery and try out any piano you please from a brand new fleet of instruments. But none of that existed in Singapore back then. It is 1878, and I am Constance Sidney Holmes, a newly wedded bride to Frank Swettenham, the appointed Secretary of Malay Affairs in Singapore. We had just wedded 10 days ago, and I am now freshly in Singapore. This is my new abode, the cottage at Government Hill, or what we would call today Fort Canning Hill. And this is my dining room. This is my drawing room, and this is the Sheraton sofa that's taking up a lot of the space right now. But I think the home is still missing something. This is the view from my place of High Street. So beautiful. And I must write to my sister, Violet, to tell her all about this. Dear Violet, all is well settling into Singapore. I must say it is very humid and mosquitoes keep me up at night scratching my legs. But my spirit is buoyed by the vibrant social life that I've been experiencing since coming here. I must say, sometimes I find myself rather lonely. I want a piano. I miss the one that we have at home. A home is not a home without a piano. Frank is settling into his role as Secretary for Malay Affairs, but I suspect that he has been involved in affairs of other nature as well. So in my lonely hours at home, I have nothing to do. Just the other day, as I was walking down the streets, I came across a bookshop, Kelly & Walsh. They have the latest catalogue of sheet music, including lots of dance music, waltzes, quadrilles, lancers. I would like very much to learn some of them in the quiet moments I have to myself in the afternoons. Write to me soon. With love, Constance. Now, just how should I get a piano in Singapore? I suppose I could get Violet to send the one that we have at home in our London apartment over. No, but that has a wooden frame, something like this. And I hear from my friends in Calcutta that their wooden frame pianos did not survive the trip. And when it received them, they certainly were not playable. All the wood had cobbled together, the piano could not make any sound. So probably not that. I suppose I could get Violet to order one from Broadwood's showroom and have it sent over, but that would take too long. There must be some other way. Look what I found here. It says, the an undersigned offer for sale of pianos by Raquel's and Company, which have lately arrived from Hamburg. These pianos are well known here, are of a beautiful tone, well secured for the climate, and are unrivaled for finish and cheapness combined. Large cottage, small, square piano, and this. Scheidmeier, cottage pianos, grand, semi-grand pianos, especially constructed for the climate. A grand piano? I think I don't have space for that. What about this? A new cottage piano by Ludwig and Rock? No, I've never heard of them before. Maybe. Okay, this looks better. An undersigned have received instructions from Colonel MacLeod that from Tangling, that's not too far from where I stay, at Government Hill, in Tangling, and he's having a furniture sale as part of his estate moving, and he has an excellent cottage piano by Broadwood, made expressly for this climate. Maybe this is the one. It's part of a one-woman show, you play your own transition music, I suppose. But we do not know how exactly the Constance Sidney Holmes, the first wife of Frank Sydenham, would get her piano in Singapore when they moved here in 1878. But we do know that 4 years later, by the time that they were leaving the colony, they were selling a cottage piano made by Broadwood. Yeah. Actually, by late 19th century, there were many pianos in Singapore. You can find them all over advertisements, right? New pianos, second-hand pianos. Second-hand piano market was largely driven by these estate sales, people who had gotten a piano and were trying to get rid of it by the time they were leaving the colony. And the pianos were coming in through personal and private shipments as well. In fact, the first piano, to the best of our knowledge, was sent in by, not this Raffles, but this Raffles, Lady Raffles, Sophia Hall. She was the wife of Sir Stamford Raffles. And in 1824, she wrote in a letter to a friend saying that she wanted to send a piano to her friend Anna Napier, who was living in Singapore. 1824, that's just 5 years after Sir Stamford Raffles founded Singapore. And she had ordered a piano for the friend from a maker in London and was having it reinforced and adjusted for the climate. Most of the pianos coming in, right, in advertisements, you see them advertised this way. Piano well secured and adapted for this climate, with iron framing especially constructed for the eastern climate. All these assurances almost make you wonder, should I have been worried in the first place that the piano would not be okay for the climate? Because in fact, before late 18th centuries, pianos mostly had a wooden frame. It was only by 1790s that bits of iron reinforcements started entering the piano. The first full cast iron frame did not enter the piano until 1825. I must clarify that the iron cast frame was not designed specifically for foreign exports. It was a technology that developed with the time, but it certainly helped to stabilize the piano's tuning and stabilize the piano structure over long voyages that included a lot of temperature and humidity changes. And it almost begs the question of, if it was so cumbersome to prepare a piano for a long trip, and the community in Singapore in the 1880s was so transient, people weren't planning to stay here for a long time. The merchants and officials who came in had perhaps they were going to be here for 1 year, 4 years, and that was it. But they went through such pains to get a piano despite their short stay here. And it almost makes you wonder, why did people do that? And why did a piano mean so much to these families? And what could a piano afford these people in the 19th century. So, when I was young, one of the things I dreaded most was going to my parents or my aunties would say, why don't you play something for us on the piano? And I was a good, obedient kid. I would stand up and walk to the piano and pretend as if my parents had not been preparing me for that moment already before. And I would play something that I was learning, a short piece, and hoping just to get through with it as quick as possible. Apparently, this tradition has been around for a very long time. I'm going to read you this Observer account by John Turnbull Thompson. He was a British civil engineer in Singapore in the 1870s, and the object of this chapter is to describe a private entertainment which serves as a type of many which I had the honor to critique. So, he describes guests arriving, and on the menu that night was sweet Bengal mutton, Chinese prawns, Kadal fowls, Sangora ducks, Yorkshire ham, Java potatoes, Malay rubies, Bombay ducks, salted turtle eggs, omelets. Imagine if we had that Bombay here at the symposium. Oh yes, and for fruits, mango steams, mangoes, rose apple, plantain. And he says, by the time it's 9 p.m., the ladies retire to the drawing room on the upper floor. The gentlemen sit for a while, probably a quarter to half an hour, and then follow. The drawing room is spacious, high and airy. Its walls and ceilings are whitewashed. Its floor is covered with Bengal mats. To the English taste, the furniture is plain. Glass shaded lamps are arranged around the walls. The effect of this is pleasing and brilliant. The white dresses and jewelry of the ladies are now set off to the best advantage. Coffee and tea are served and form an antidote to the stronger beverages previously indulged in. The ladies now receive expected attention from the more gallant portion of the gentlemen visitors. The piano is opened and a duet is played. The card players retire to a snug and cool end of the veranda, where also brandy and water may be had. The young ladies take their turn at the piano, and immediately the room is cleared for dancing. So this idea of owning a piano, right, in the 19th century, in some place like Singapore, affords you, yes, post-dinner entertainment, on top of giving you something to pass the time in your hours alone. But I think there is something to be said about how significant the piano is as a hearth in any domestic setting, right? It is the place where people gather together. It is the place, before the gramophones came in and long before Spotify came in, that was the only way that you can have music on demand. It was to make a play your own music. And for people who were just coming into the colony, right, and music lovers who wanted to keep up with the latest fashion, the newest operas, the newest dance music that was released back home in the West, in Europe, the only way to do that was to buy the sheet music and play it yourself at home. And that's why there are so many operatic transcriptions for piano duets, right? And so many light dance music that was published, and you can see that all peppered through the catalogs of that time. And so piano really afforded a way for people to have music in their homes, have music to accompany them to dances, and be connected to home, to music on home. Not only was the piano an important instrument, a hearth in domestic spaces, it was also a gathering point in a lot of public spaces. Famous pianists toured Singapore. Not that they came specifically here, but because by the end of the 19th century there were ship liners, which means that there was a schedule that ships would arrive at, and that allowed for pianists or anyone touring to have a schedule. And so along their Far East tour, they would make a pit stop at Singapore, Joseph Hoffman even came to Singapore in 1890s. And so that's not surprising, right, that there are like public recitals for pianos. But I want to share two instances, my favorite instances that I've come across so far, of pianos in perhaps unexpected settings, public settings. The first, I came across this travel account by a beachcomber in the Orient by the name of Harry Foster. He basically was a beach bum, a homeless person traveling through, just hopping on the trains and getting enough money and making money along the way to get to the next place. And he toured. Of the many places that he went to, he stopped by Singapore. He arrived at this train station here, and at Raffles Hotel, he was supposed to meet the person who would give him accommodation and money during his time in Singapore. When he made it there, he realized that the person had failed, and so he was truly, truly penniless. And he took a really long walk down all the way by the bay, and he landed up here, near the present-day Tanjong Pagar docks. And he bumped into somebody on the way there, and the person was like, "Hey, you look like you need some help." And so it brought Harry Foster to Kwong Bi's bar. And so it was this Chinese man that owned a waterfront grog shop, or like a liquor bar, and he brought him there. And they happened to have a piano at the bar. And so Harry Foster offered his services. "Maybe I can play piano for your bar as entertainment." And so Kwong Bi accepted his offer. And that's how Harry Foster became a permanent fixture at Kwong Bi's piano for a period of time. There he would entertain sailors who were coming from the docks. They were actually making their way to the back then the red light district of Singapore, but they would make a stop at Kwong Bi's bar first, and they would make all kind of requests for Harry Foster to play. And Merry Widow Waltz, right, or any sort of popular dance tunes from that time were often requested. And so, yes, Harry Foster very kindly entertained them and had a ball of a time during his pit stop in Singapore. The next instance that I want to share is a pianist by the name of Claude Olivero, his daytime job was that of a stenographer. Like he took notes in like he had a government job basically. But his after work job, what he moonlighted as a pianist in many hotels, including Grand Hotel of Europe in Singapore. And this is a bit of oral history that was recorded in the 1890s when Claude was well into his 70s, and he was recounting his fond memories of being the pianist at the Europe Hotel.
I'm going to play to you a German Strauss waltz. The name is With the Magic of Your Smile. I used to play at the Europe Hotel because we used to play classics, and this was a very nice Strauss waltz, which is a little difficult but very nice. With the magic
That's so delightful. I want to play the piano like Claude. So yes, what I present today is some of the preliminary findings that I've gathered since delving into this social history of pianos a year ago. To the best of my knowledge, I don't think there is any work done so specifically in this area just yet. And it is so fascinating to find out just how pianos arrived here. You know, who were the people who owned pianos back at the very beginning? And these days, right, when you could easily get the impression that of the kids learning music in Singapore, they either learn the piano or the violin. Like piano is just one of the most common instruments learned here. And it is easy to see the piano, right, from an academic perspective as, oh, this colonial inheritance that we have, and there's this whole history of how music has been institutionalized and taught here. I am not disregarding any of that. I'm well aware of that in this research, but maybe in today's presentation, I just want to share some of the lighter moments, or some of the more deeply personal moments of people who owned these instruments. Back then, right, they weren't practicing to get into the conservatory, right, but it meant something, it meant so much to them that they wanted the instruments here with them, be it to recreate a kind of idea of leisure that they had back home, right, be it to recreate the idea of this aesthetic dinner party that they had back home, but it still meant something to the social and personal lives of these people. And having piano as public entertainment, like Claude, as we heard just now, or if Claude plays, I don't know how Harry Foster played on complete piano. Don't know how to imagine that. Although he did say he played on a dilapidated piano, so well. Yeah, but it doesn't take present day reimagining to liberate. You know, the way that we play. People were already doing that 100 years ago. They were self-liberated in some ways. And maybe, I don't know, maybe we could get back to that just by being aware that music like that existed in Singapore and music making like that existed in Singapore. And so, thank you for being here.
I didn't introduce you, but I think it's the best because I think it's a deeply personal project to you as well, and you painted a portrait of yourself as well as the story of the piano, so in a way it's a better introduction than Xiangning. That doesn't need any introduction anyway. You're a wonderful musician, creative director, and writer. Writing is very important for you in storytelling. And I think the story especially, it's coming from the woman and the female perspective as well, the voices that is not very, that given platform, especially from the 19th century, from the colonial era as well. So maybe you can elaborate on this aspect, on the woman's voice in the whole story of piano writing here. And I thought as well it's more of a comment, the ambiguity in everything. Yeah. So it's a home being away and this connection with home, loneliness and community coming together around, and all this very poetic, metaphorical things that just come together in the story. I thought it was very beautiful. Thank you. So the woman's story.
Yeah, I am very conscious that all of the voices that I've shared so far here, apart from Claude's voice, is of white male, the Europeans who are here, and Europeans being a catch-all term, right, for the British, the French, the Germans, the Australians, or just basically anybody who back then looked Angmo. And when doing research, I was hoping so hard to find an actual account. So what I said of Constance is completely made up, but the fact that she married Frank a certain time, that was not made up, that Frank certain time had affairs, that was also not made up. But her perspective, and that she had a sister called Violet, that's also true. But the details of that, I had to imagine that because I can't find any source of a lady who owned a piano during that time and had wrote that in correspondences, shared her personal view. But there are plenty of observation accounts by a lot of white males. And because they also had more easy access to publication, that was just a fact. There are, I must say, if you are interested, there are some memoirs of ladies who have toured the globe. I mean, those are wildly fascinating. In other parts of the Strait settlements, you can find a few memoirs of ladies who were, the wives of officials, and they published their life story basically. But it is, that is already such a specific group of evidence you're trying to look at and trying to see if they wrote about pianos or their experience with the pianos. It's even more specific. So, what you said, Olga, it is true, piano is associated so much with femininity and feminine identity in the 19th century. If you are a daughter of a middle class family, a middle class or above family, you'd be sent to learn the piano because the piano is the instrument that showcases your physique in the most desirable way.
That's what you mentioned in opening Act 1. When you don't know who is talking, is it the piano talking or the man talking? That's what I think you captured.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But the Act 1 it's about this foreign entity, right? The idea that the piano was also once one time a foreigner, a stranger in Singapore, and it was like an immigrant, I suppose, in some sense, coming to a new place. But the ways that it has assimilated or found a place here, I think that's the journey that I'm trying to use.
It's the future of the piano, of piano performing. Since the symposium shows, that's where all the new flow for the future comes from. Now the journey is, I guess, to the west rather than the west, please. Thank you. Any questions? Any comments? That's the final session. That's the. Thank you, Wits. I find it so nice. You were opening for Mike, isn't it? The first presenter with Dr. Marin kind of thing that respects. Yeah, full circle. So very special. There was a question? No.
It was only the other thing, so the feminine voice of the piano, but obviously there's a point when it ceases being people wanting to remember their home that was elsewhere, so that it comes into the communities that have been here for longer, and it's obviously also proving itself a tricky story to find. Yet, obviously, by the beginning of the 20th century, Chinese families, for example, were very connected to the piano in Singapore, because I know from the other book and so on. So that's going to be obviously another really potentially interesting discovery to be uncovering. Why did the piano make the leap across in the culture? How's that going? Are things beginning to come out?
I just realized that Ong Teng Cheong, at one point president of Singapore, right, his whole family played the piano. If you go on Singapore Archives, the first image in 1933 that you can find, it's called A Woman by the Piano. That was his mom. And he played the piano too, and his wife also plays the piano. And it is true that by around the turn of the century, into 20th century, you start seeing more non-Western names on estate sales, on the catalogs of people buying piano. But that came later, and it's easy to write a narrative of oh yes, they bought a piano because piano is a symbol of class, a symbol of wealth and prestige, and it's the people who are aspiring to socially climb into the social circles of the elites, which were for a long time the Europeans. It's easy to write a narrative that way. That's why the non-Westerners bought the piano. But I think it is the direction of finding more personal accounts of people who love the music. I think it's not just all about using the piano as a symbol of status and wealth, right? That we can find perhaps a more interesting narrative, a way to move forward also with this idea of studying material culture and colonialism and empire. So it's not just all so
And this is suppose the end of the show, right? And the end of the presentation. Thanks a lot.